Welcome back everyone once again to another truck request video. As you can see, the YR87 is here by popular vote on this comment right here on the Dairy 3194 truck request video that we just previously did. So thank you guys so much for all the nominations. I see your nominations, guys. I am upvoting, casting my vote on your nominations in the comment section right now. Please pause the video, go into the comment section, and give me your best base game truck that you would like to see next in the series, and the most upvoted comment will be the one we feature on the next video. Now, just to kind of touch base on this subject, I've been getting a lot of DLC vehicle requests in the comments, and I just want to kind of reiterate that this is just for base game trucks. And I don't know if people really understand what base game trucks are, so I'm going to break it down just real quickly. For any new players that have just started playing the game. Base game trucks are from the original 2020 release of SnowRunner. That is including the Navistar and also the Con Marshall. It is also including the first 46 or 48 vehicles that came with the base game from Michigan, Alaska, and Tamir. That is the base game. Those are all 2020 vehicles. So I'm kind of started this series because I want to touch on those because they're just so old, and we want to see if they're still relevant. So before I open up DLC vehicles to do the truck request / revisit series 2, we're going to start and keep going with the base game trucks. But don't worry, we'll touch on some of the DLC trucks a little bit later. Now, concerning the YR87, this has been one of the top tier scouts in the game since release, and it has been and probably will stay as such moving forward. And we're going to talk about why. Engine sets. Its top engine is at 90,000 torque. It shares this with the Con Sentinel, also with the Con Marshall. 90,000 torque is definitely good enough to pull scout trailers, and that's probably the only thing you should be pulling with this truck because it only can haul scout trailers. You can use this truck to flip other vehicles over because it does have decent weight to it, and that's the reason why it can pull scout trailers. Something you need to know about scout fuel trailers. And I think if you're going to scout with an actual scout vehicle class, you should attempt to take along a scout fuel trailer with you, just because you want to have that range. Regardless of if the vehicle is efficient, like this one here, it also has a pretty good roof rack on it, you definitely want to take that with you. The YAR will pull it well. It will hardly even notice it's behind it. In some cases, you might lose a little bit of steering control because it rocks a little bit back whenever you hit the gas because of its soft suspension. But overall, it does really well. So a quick tidbit of information, scout fuel trailers are actually heavier when they're empty rather than being full. It's a weird thing. I have no clue why they set it up this way, but it is the inverse. So usually an empty trailer would be lighter, logically speaking, but for some reason, an empty scout fuel trailer is actually heavier. So that's a little bit of information you probably do or do not want to know. But anyways, this truck can basically haul them with ease, kind of like the Lodestar. Gearboxes are just standard Scout gearboxes. I'm probably going to use the SnowRunner because in a lot of ways, I don't need to bust through the freeway gearbox and have a little high gear. I do like my low range gears because I can kind of set my speed limit to a low or low minus, depending on if I'm crawling through very thick mud. And that's one of the superpowers of the YAR, is it can crawl through very thick mud and get through it because of these special tires here, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And also the new Scout tires that have come along with the Jetpack. Has no raised suspension, but it really doesn't need it because it has some of the largest tires in its class, which are 49 inches. And as you can see, I just spoke on these, the Jat MS tires. These are actually a little bit wider than its native TRMs or TM2s. But I would still probably use either or because you're going to be able to have really good performance with both of these. So pick your choosing. I like the way these look. I've always have. Very aggressive looking. But the MS3s, MS1s, MS2s are still very good options for this thing because they're actually a little bit wider in the files than the native TM2s or TM1s. And then it also gets to chain tires. Even though these Ultima CS1s they look great, I see the concept, but they are actually worse, I believe, in grip coefficient than the normal chain tires. So moving forward, autonomous winch. This is going to be great because the vehicle itself, I believe, is stable. But if you do flip it over, this gives you that second chance. Now, I must say, because of the tall silhouette of this truck, it makes it kind of tricky to flip back over. It's not really that bad. I'm not going to hype it up as it's something that's really bad. It's just something I've noted that it makes it kind of tricky in some areas to get this thing back on its wheels with the autonomous winch when you flip it over. But overall, I think you'll notice the truck itself is pretty stable. And I'm going to mention this as well. Its suspension flex is really good. You'll see when you're going over suspension or going over obstacles, its suspension is, going up and down and conforming to the terrain it's hitting. And also, its steering control is very fast, has a fast twitch steering, and it recenters very quickly. If you're using the controller setting or the steering wheel setting and the controller in conjunction. So just kind of remember that. Nice here, nice tall front facing snorkel. This makes it so you can go through rivers and stuff like that. It can do that and not get washed away just because it's rather big. The weight of it is not as heavy as a Lodestar. It's right below the Lodestar concerning weight. So it will handle some rivers relatively well, but I would definitely go with the Current and not against it because you will flip over. Even trucks that are bigger than this and heavier than this will flip over in some of those areas. So just kind of watch that there. Now, for the roof rack, this is actually one of the highlights of this vehicle is it has a massive roof rack, 4 spare tires, 300 repair points, 32 gallons of fuel. That's over 110 liters of fuel to call upon. This is a whole other tank of gas plus 2 gallons. Something I do want to mention regarding having all this fuel that you have on the roof rack, also in the fuel capacity, you have 110 liters, 30 gallons here, and then you have a whole other tank of gas on top. I do have to add, there's something I didn't mention when we were talking about engine options and then the gearbox as well, is the Yar has the Dream setup. And this is what I'm talking about, the switchable all-wheel drive and always-on diff lock. What does that mean? Well, in this very unique case with the Yar that's pretty much exclusive to the Yar here in vehicles in SnowRunner is whenever you toggle off all-wheel drive, you will not incur the 80% all-wheel drive penalty from the SnowRunner gearbox. I believe this one might be a 40. This is a 90. I don't recall what the stock is. But even using the SnowRunner gearbox with all-wheel drive engaged, the Yar is actually really efficient for how big it is. And even if you're pulling a trailer, it does rather well. It's definitely a much more efficient vehicle than something like the Lodestar with its top engine. I'll say that. The Lodestar is a little bit more rapid. This one's a little bit more marching at a decent pace. But overall, this truck will probably outlast that vehicle in distance is concerned. Now, the always-on diff lock is special here and the switchable all-wheel drive because you can toggle this off, not have an 80% all-wheel drive penalty, and continue to have a front-powered axle here. Especially, this is great for turning, especially when you need to make a turn and your front axle is not powered. Having that front axle powered helps you pull through that turn, right? Not only does your front axle stay powered whenever you switch off all-wheel drive, but your second axle stays on as well. It's not a vehicle like a traditional 6x6 where the back 2 axles are firing like you see on hauling class trucks. The front 2 are actually firing. So this is actually kind of good, especially for maintaining steering control and having tighter turns because the Yar kind of needs it. And this is one thing I don't like about the Yar is its suspension is very soft and it's a wonderful thing for keeping it on balance and keeping it stable. But sometimes when you're pulling something behind you or just hitting the gas, something that happens is the truck rocks backward. And whenever you have a turning input, and the turning is great, don't get me wrong, fast twitch steering, it can turn really well. But when you don't have weight down on your front axles here, your turns become less tight. And that's something that I have known for a while. And that's kind of like the only little thing that I don't really like about this vehicle is sometimes the turning circle is not very tight. But overall, having a powered axle and 4 axles firing in the front where you kind of need them to be is a very unique thing for the Yar. So you essentially can almost run around with no all-wheel drive if you are in lighter areas. You don't really need it. The only time you actually need all-wheel drive is when you're hitting sticky mud. You just need to traverse through it quicker because always-on diff lock is quite amazing. So you see the Yar 87 is a relatively strong vehicle that pretty much will be as such moving forward. I know I'm kind of jumping ahead because I usually talk about this in the driving portion, but I'm now going to jump to the driving portion and talk about how I felt about this vehicle back in 2020, how I felt about it now, moving forward here in 2026, Q1 2027. And also, I'll probably retouch on where it's going to stack up here in the new tier list that will be coming out later. During my early time in SnowRunner, I leaned upon a lot of vehicles that were really good at just hitting the gas and driving through certain conditions. The Yar essentially embodies that. There's not many scouts that can traverse really deep areas like the Yar can. To be honest, there's probably only a few now here in 2025 moving forward, and who knows if we'll get more. We probably will down the road, hopefully not. But also, something to add is the Yar can actually traverse deeper conditions than most regular hauling class 6x6s or even 8x8 trucks in the game. And that's just because its tires are actually really big, really wide, and it will essentially sit on top of the surface, and then at low throttle speeds or low gear setting speeds, it will just kind of slowly march through them. And this is why people really love the Yar. This is kind of why I used it. It was kind of like a crutch to get me through things, instead of me kind of thinking outside the box to try to get around those sticky areas. During the base game and also into the year 1 pass, the quote-unquote super conditions were much more present than they are moving forward in the year 2, 3, and 4, and also probably in the year 5. Those things have been few and far between, and this is why I think the Yar has become, I don't want to say a little less relevant, but its superpower of going through, being the scout to just march through super conditions, kind of, I don't want to say got power crept, but kind of got rebalanced whenever the Jat pack came out. Those tires I showed you on screen, the Jat MS3s, 2s, and 1s, those are actually wider than its native TM2 tire. And this will actually make it even more buoyant than it was with its native TM2 tire. And at this point, this is where the Scout class has kind of changed. They have just kind of made a come up, and I think the addition of the Jat pack has kind of boosted Scouts as a whole up to a different level, because before the Jat pack, Scout trucks really struggle with mud. And essentially, usually the way I use a Scout vehicle is I will elude mud, and I kind of still do, but having those wider tires that they offer, the MS3s, or 2s or 1s, it kind of gives smaller Scouts the ability to do things maybe, I think, a little bit similar to what the Yar can do, but still the Yar has them beat in weight, probably roof rack supplies, tire size, suspension travel, and also having basically the dream setup with, always on diff lock, and then, its front 2 axles firing when you turn off all-wheel drive. It's just something that's very unique about this vehicle. I've done some crazy things with the Yar. Actually, on season 15, we did this like Yar core short, YouTube short, where I climbed up this cliff face with him. I did it with the Lodestar previously, or it might have been even the Hummer, I forget, but it did really well. It does well pretty much any time I get into it, and that's kind of why I don't get into it nowadays, is because one, the presence of like super conditions are much less present, and also even if there were, I would just find my way around them. So, and I think sometimes I don't use it because it's so good that I would rather just try to pull something else out, like a Hummer, CK or something like that, and then run around with those Scouts. But as you can see in my hard mode, it's really not the case. I've been using the Earth Roamer LTI just to get things done because I just want to get through season 16 so fast. But usually I try to use the smaller Scouts that can pull a Scout trailer, because not many Scouts can pull a Scout trailer. They are very much so inhibited by just attaching that thing. It adds drag. It gets heavier whenever you empty it out, like I mentioned previously, which is totally not logical. But here the TM2s and also the MS3s will generate enough grip, and also the vehicle's weight itself and power that's in its engine, it will essentially handle those things with ease. It's just one of those vehicles. Now, where does this thing stack up here in 2025, 2026, moving on to Q1 2027 when the year 5 pass concludes? It's probably still going to be in the upper echelons of the S tier class. It is that good. The vehicle itself will always be in that tier. I'm not gonna lie, it is really strong. Essentially all those things we talked about in the garage tour portion just kind of lay in front of you the sheer facts that merit it being up there amongst the better Scout class vehicles. So is there any way we can change the YAR to make it better? I would actually argue it doesn't need any changes at all. I don't think adding a normal trailer hitch on it or anything of those sorts, the YAR is perfectly balanced where it's at. It's already one of the better scout vehicles in the game. It doesn't necessarily need anything else, pretty much. One could probably argue it needs more fuel in its tank because, new scouts have come out with more fuel, but honestly, its range is absolutely phenomenal. And with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Please go into the comments and hit me with a comment on what base game truck that you would like to see featured next in the series, and the most upvoted comment will be the one that we tackle next on the truck request series. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video and potentially learned a few things along the way as well. So until next time, God bless and stay upright.